So our next presenter, you may all recognize, are none other than the award winner this morning, Brent Pilgrim from the Beck Group. He's going to be talking to us about, I love that. Who was that? A little shout out. That was lively.
Yeah.
Model-based estimating.
That's it.
All right,
That's it.
take it away.
I'm clickerless, so Holly, can you be my wingman with the slides? Is that possible? Well, thank you for the opportunity to, oh, okay, thank you. That's all right. Thank you for the opportunity to share with you something that I'm really, really passionate about. But first, can we give it up for Beck Technology? What a cool venue and what a cool conference, right? This group, I know we meet at things like Advancing Precon. It's quickly becoming a family for me if it's not already for you. And you know, I know many of you in this room, if not all of you, give such a significant amount of our lives to this industry and to our companies in exchange for an opportunity, really, just an opportunity to do something meaningful with our lives through our career as a vocation, and using our vocation to kind of share a little bit about who we are with each other and our personal principles and goals and things like that. So I think this industry is a great place to be. I can't talk enough about this industry to people that I meet and share. Like, they've got 16, 17, 18-year-old kids, and I'm thinking like, hey, you guys, the construction industry is a great place to be. There's some really cool opportunities out here. So I want to set the table real quick with a Menti poll. So let's go ahead and jump to the polls and just kind of get some ideas out there around who's doing what with model-based estimating. So yeah, my topic is around model-based estimating. I'm going to be referring to that as integrated estimating. It's kind of an synonym for me, and I'm throwing away terms like 5D. I think most people in the industry think that's kind of kitschy and are done with that term. And I think, as you'll see in my presentation, model-based estimating is not quite an accurate term for us to use anymore. So I'm going to encourage us all to start calling it integrated estimating when we are doing integrated estimating. So while y'all are taking the poll, I'll quickly share a little bit about myself. I've been with the Beck family of companies for the last 21 years. I started with Beck right out of college. I only wanted to go to work for Beck. As many of you guys know, they are a design build firm, an integrated firm. We have in-house architecture and construction, and that was really where my heart was. And I thank the Beck Group for an opportunity to be with them these last 21 years. Spent about 8 years with Stuart, with Beck Technology, learning the technology, getting some exposure. I've been doing model-based estimating for about 15 years out of those 21 years. And I'm now at this stage in my career, I'm really pulling all that past knowledge to kind of come to fruition with a brand new idea. And I've got a very short 20 minutes with you. I'm between you and lunch back there to share with you what I'm really passionate about. So I'm going to do my best to hold to that and share some passion with you real quick. So are you using and performing model-based estimating regularly, using standardized approach that is deployed consistently? Good. I was hoping for that result. So I didn't know what the result was going to be, but 83% of you are saying no. Let's go to the next poll. On a scale of 1 to 10, how effective would you say you are with your model-based workflow? Zero being not very effective, 10 being very, very effective. Okay, kind of similar results, heavy on the left-hand side. That's good because, go ahead and go to the next poll. That's really good because one of the things I'm so passionate about is I think we've cracked the code. I think after about 15 years of trying model-based estimating, I think we've cracked the code, and I'm really excited to share that with you guys, and hopefully we can all adopt it as an industry and move forward. Do you use model-based estimating for conceptual or schematic design level exercises specifically? And I'm asking you to exclude those of you who are remnant profiler super users. John, don't answer that question. Again, 76%, something like that, 77. Johnny actually touched on this in his presentation. Perhaps why is because we don't feel like models are developed well enough to use in the early stage, or we don't think it's got all the information we need, and I'm gonna hopefully convince you otherwise of that today. Let's set the stage for the presentation. I'm gonna share with you very quickly what I think integrated estimating is not. I'm gonna try to explain to you what I think it is. I wanna share with you how we can do it, and then finish up on the value. All right, just to set the table, who was doing model-based estimating, as we called it, back in kind of the 2008, 2012 timeframe? We've got a couple of people. You were probably using a tool like Innovia if you weren't using Profiler. Nothing wrong with Innovia. It was a great tool back then, but you were probably using Timberline, and you probably look like that at the end of the day, right? Model-based estimating back then was, if we could just get the design teams to do these 150 things, we can estimate from the model. And our day job shrinks to about 4 hours. And of course, the architects said, we're not paid to do that. I'm barely getting paid enough as it is, so no. And model-based estimating, in my opinion, kind of died on the vine. Well, I want to tell you today, model-based estimating is not, or I'm going to stick to my guns here and say integrated estimating. Integrated estimating is not what you experienced in 2008, 2009, that time frame. If that was your experience and you haven't touched it since, give it another look. It's also not Destiny Profiler. Some of you may not even know what that is. Destiny Profiler was a tool way ahead of its time. Was truly the first integrated estimating tool, if you want my personal opinion. And everything I'm going to share with you today is really my personal experiences gleaned from that and distilled down into how can we take those concepts that were so successful in Profiler and apply them to a new workflow. It's not Assemble Systems. It's not Destiny Estimator, to be quite honest with you, although Destiny Estimator is probably the tool from a software standpoint that's perhaps most poised to capitalize on integrated estimating. And it's not this expectation that you need to have a fully developed model or expect the design team to carry the load for this particular workflow to work. So let's qualify what the workflow is. If that's everything, it's not. This idea started coming about as I was working on the Georgia Tech project. Georgia Tech, pretty innovative, pretty progressive owner, if you will. And they had a project that we were working on that they specifically called out 5D in their RFP. And so we worked with them, and the project was successful. No comment on that. It was fine. That's because they weren't seeing how the sausage was made. They saw the end product, and the way the sausage was being made was not fun. It was that picture I saw earlier of the guy expressing frustration, right? But they didn't see that part. They saw the finished product, and we made it work. But it was, as I was flying between Denver, Colorado and Atlanta, Georgia, where I was thinking, like, there's got to be a way we can, how can I made this work for 15 years in Profiler. How come I can't make this work with other tools? And it was that really served as the impetus to say, okay, let me distill down the process that we were so successful with Profiler and figure out how to apply that to a different set of tools. And that's exactly what we did. So I broke down model-based estimating. I said, you know what? We've been saying this wrong for the last 10 years. All of us in the industry who were saying we were doing model-based estimating, we're actually just doing model-based quantity takeoff. We're pulling quantities from a model, and we were manually putting them into an estimate, whatever estimate platform we were using at the time. Perhaps also significantly is we had no idea what we were going to get from the design team from a model standpoint. So we were using what I call an ad hoc process to just take what we could. Every model was different. Every design firm was going to give us something different. And so we just took the models and we used a tool like Assemble, which is a great tool, to take a random model and pull what we can from it. And we just got what we could from it. But perhaps the most significant pieces of model-based estimating is the quantities or the model objects are not connected to the cost items, and we're not deploying it in concept design. We're waiting until, quote unquote, the model is developed enough. Have you heard that before, right? We don't need to do that. We can start model-based estimating, integrated estimating on day one when we have a concept model. Oh, let me go back to this. So all of that kind of translates into what are these characteristics then that define the integrated estimating workflow? And there's several, you can read those, but perhaps the most important are this idea that we have a linkage, we have a technical or a digital link between the model object and the line item of cost and showing where that quantity comes from. And perhaps most important behind that one is the idea that I can employ this, I can deploy this, starting at concept design and use it all the way through. We are so close at Beck to doing real continuous estimating. And I think the only thing that's truly hindering us is me getting in front of teams and doing more training. But I think the concept is there. So those all distill down into these 5 characteristics. And I really do encourage you, I should have made a quick statement in my introduction that I'm here representing Beck, yes. Beck has been my proving ground for a lot of these concepts. I'm also here representing the BIM Forum. I'm on a task force with the BIM Forum called Estimating and Scheduling with BIM. And our goal is to make all of this information available to you guys for free so that you can start to adopt these same principles and concepts. So these principles distill down into 5 perhaps characteristics that I would use to qualify what the integrated estimating workflow is. And if you've got an owner out there that says, hey, I want you to do 5D, or you've got a team that you're working with that says, we do model-based estimating, I would really challenge them, get to know what these 5 essentials are and get to understand what they really are communicating and make sure that's what we're doing. If we're not doing it, then correct and say, we're actually doing model-based quantity takeoff. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's not integrated estimating. The QR code that was there was just a link to an article that kind of expounds on that. It was published several years ago. The most important thing that you saw in that's circled in, well, it's not circled, but down in the lower right-hand corner around 4 o'clock is integrated cost. I want to use this concept of chain of custody that is a legal term to describe why this integrated cost is so important to the integrated estimating workflow. In a court of law, evidence cannot be introduced into the trial if the defense cannot prove that it's been held in a chain of custody since the time it was lifted from the crime scene. So what that means is you take evidence from a crime scene, you package it up. It has to be, there's a paperwork trail that shows that it's been protected all the way until the day it's introduced into the court of law. And that's to preserve the evidence. Well, integrated cost actually kind of does the same thing, right? We've got a model object that we're pulling a quantity from. Anybody on the team, any estimator, junior, senior, any architect on the team, the client, ought to be able to go to the estimate and go, tell me where that quantity comes from. I don't want to trust you, I want to know. And using this workflow, you can select on that line item and trace back using the digital breadcrumbs to the model object if it's linked. So I think this is crucial. I think this is probably the most significant piece of the workflow, although the other 4 are just as important. So we deployed this workflow. We started implementing this in January of this year. And I've got tons of examples of where we're doing this successfully. And some of the images on the screen are just here to show you that there's real proof. I'm not making this up. This is not smoke and mirrors. There's no marketing spiel here. This is real stuff. That's why I'm so excited about it, because I'm not making any of this up. The other thing I want you to know about these images on the screen is that about half of these images are coming from our design team's models. So we are actually starting to use our design team model as the single source of truth. We don't have to debate where the information came from. It came from their model. The other half of these I'm equally excited about because they were built by pre-construction people. Pre-construction professionals were in Revit on our team modeling projects. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But these are all real projects. The other thing you might notice about these images is that they span the design life cycle. Some of them are very, very early conceptual models. Some of them are much more detailed and have a lot more information. So the takeaway from that is that this workflow, the integrated estimating workflow, applies all the way starting at concept design through CDs or GMP or wherever that process theoretically ends. And so we utilize this brand new concept that's published in the BIM Forum documentation called Model Quantity Origin. It's a brand new concept, and it helps us apply model-based estimating techniques or standards to early models. Who in this room does conceptual estimating? I don't care whether it's model-based or not. So all of you are doing this. You probably just don't have the terminology for it, but you're all doing this when you put together a conceptual estimate. And I'm going to speak more about that in just a second. So I've got a couple of examples from the wild, I'll call it, where I want to share with you some real world examples. So here's a model, clearly conceptual design, right? I mean, it's just a concept model. It's a massing model, nothing more, nothing less. There's not a lot of detail there. Yet a full conceptual estimate was developed from this model. John, it kind of looks and feels like Profiler, doesn't it? Close. The other thing I want to share with you is what value we get out of the integrated estimating workflow is we have a visual tool now to communicate cost information. perhaps that is the best value we can bring to the team, is not just sliding an Excel document or a detailed line item estimate across the table, but actually using the images from the model we either built or consumed to convey cost assumptions. What did you guys assume for X, Y, or Z? So here in this conceptual model, you've got some just what I would call generic wall objects that are representing a blend of skin materials, glass and solid material, that our design team conveyed to us verbally. Say, hey guys, we haven't got the exterior envelope figured out yet, but we know we're gonna have to be about 60% glass and 40% solid, or something to that effect. Here's an example at schematic design. You can see that the design resolution is progressing. We've got actually notions of or design intent related to the exterior envelope. You can see how the estimate lines up beside it. And then another example at design development. The design resolution in this image is much further along. But you can also see this is a real image we use to present the cost information back to the client. Because it's all tied to the model, there's a digital link between the cost items in the model and the model itself. I can break the model up visually and say, hey, you know that tower? The tower is $60 million. The below grade parking is 20 million, or whatever the number actually is. That's not possible with that degree of integrity without having integrated cost. Okay, so in the short time that I have, I want to share with you kind of how this workflow works. And really, I could talk about this for about 4 hours. So I'm only going to whet your appetite as best I can and really encourage you to either connect with me afterwards or go to the BIM Forum website and start to dig into some of the more detailed information about this. You might be asking, well, what's the secret sauce? Where is the software sales pitch here? There really is none. For me to be able to make those 5 essentials work, leaving Profiler behind and moving into kind of this next generation integrated estimating workflow, I had to learn Revit. I had to demystify this very intimidating, complicated software that I saw all my peers using, and I had never used it. I kept Revit at arm's length because I didn't have to engage with it. So I spent last summer with one of our VBG team members who graciously gave me about an hour of his time for about 4 weeks, and I said, Philip, here's the concept I need to replicate in Revit. This is what I used to do in Profiler. How do I do this in Revit? And we were able to break this down step by step, and I'm here to say I'm not a Revit super user, but a lot of those models I could have built. Some of those models I did build. Most of those models, people on my team build. So it's possible. You just have to demystify Revit. If you're not a Revit user, don't be so afraid of it. And hopefully I can help demystify it. There's some basic tools in there that we need to use to make it work. So no proprietary software. You can get all of this off the shelf. You've got Revit. You've got Destiny Estimator. Estimator is truly, really and truly, yes, you could probably take these principles and use them in other tools. But Estimator really is poised perfectly to capitalize on this workflow because of the integrated capabilities that it has. And yes, you can get this, you can get some, I would call it training material or information about this off the BIM Forum website. Okay, so to get into it, the first thing, I'm gonna give you about 4 slides that say, what does the model author need to do to make this work? And then I'm gonna give you about 3 slides that say, what does the pre-con professional need to do to make this workflow effective? I'm gonna call it the model author because it may not be the design team member. It may be the pre-con person saying, you know what, I need to model this. I need a model so I can develop a cost estimate. And I really wanna encourage you to give that a shot. So the first thing is this idea that we need to be intentional about our model authoring. If we're gonna create an object in the model, it needs to have a purpose. It needs to serve a purpose. My team and I have a joke. There was a project that came out and there was a lot of things that weren't modeled, but doggone it, the bistro set, the table set was showing on the balcony. That's important stuff, right? So everything in the model has to be intentional. And when we do that, we're enabling ourselves to create a hierarchy of information, kind of starting to get into like data governance for Revit objects, saying this is the parent object and everything inside this object is owned by it. And so you might have like the office tower itself is the parent object, and then all the glass and all the doors and all the partitions that are in that are children objects of that parent object. I'm not gonna get into detail there because I could go on for that, but Intentional model authoring enables us to avoid this ad hoc strategy that we have to deploy when we don't know what we're going to get from the design team. Massing models. Perhaps the biggest ask that I have to do with my design team is say, can you build, if I'm not modeling it, can you build a massing model in this project? And most of them go like, why? We don't do that unless we're doing like concepts or something like that. The massing model is our opportunity as a team to have a single source of truth for gross area of the project. Who in their career has gotten a tabular form of an area study from the design team, done your own QTO, and those don't match, ever? This massing model is actually a great tool to say, what do you see as the gross area of this project? And I'm going to use that, and of course we can debate about what that is, but the massing model is that tool that does that for us. The next thing is every object in the model needs 3 pieces of key information. That's it. That's it. 3 pieces of information. 66% of those you get almost for free. So I'm really asking for help with about a third of that. The first one is this idea, this notion of a location 1 value. We all use probably something similar to location 1. It's like, what is the primary component of the estimate? It's the office tower, it's the site, it's the parking structure. So I want to convert that to a model hierarchy. And so when you're developing any object in a model that belongs to that location, we need to tag it that way. So in our Beck template, in our Beck Revit template, we created an estimating location 1 parameter. Very simple. This is not a heavy lift. This is not a big ask of my design team. In fact, you can kind of go back and retroactively do it in a few minutes through creative selection sets. The second one is assembly code. Oh, I'm sorry, let's go back one more. The second one is assembly codes. Assembly codes we basically get for free, although every design firm may have not spent the same amount of time curating their assembly codes, but assembly codes are Revit's kind of analogous term for uniformat values. And if you use the out-of-the-box, you kind of get there. Our firm has spent a significant amount of time curating our assembly codes, and in our Revit library, tying those properly to values. So the assembly code is what says, hey, this slab is associated with A40 slab on grade, or B10 elevated slabs. And so that's, again, another layer of hierarchy we need in information. The third piece is the type name, and this is basically, what is this object representing? I mean, at a fundamental level, what is it? Is it a wall? Is it a slab? And this is probably where we go off the rails the most, and it's an easy fix. I've noticed that our design team, or design teams in general, will just use generic slab objects, like, oh, this is the slab on grade, but it's actually 10 stories in the air. So we're kind of lazy. We need to just ask our design team, like, hey, if that's an elevated deck, just rename that family type to elevated deck, so that when I'm seeing that through the lens of estimator, I can actually understand what scope of work it's trying to represent. The last piece on the model authoring side is quantity information. For every model object that we intentionally author, we have to be able to quantify it some way. We get this for free. I mean, a slab knows its area. Revit's a parametric tool. A slab knows its perimeter. So most of the stuff we get for free, the real ask here is if you create a generic model object from scratch, if you're creating generic families, put some parameters in there that allow me to quantify that object. So it might be like the height of a stair tower or something to that effect. Okay, now let's switch over to the Precon requirements, and I'm going to bring this home. On the Precon side of the house, we need to deploy this LOD responsive QTO strategy. This is perhaps the coolest concept that came out of all this. This is what allows us to look at a concept model that's got maybe a massing and some generic walls and some slabs, and do a full-on conceptual estimate with it. So yes, we're leaning on BIM Forum's concept of LOD, level of development, in terms of how are we going to estimate an LOD 200 object? Conversely, how are we going to estimate an LOD 350 object? Those are different approaches because they represent different levels of detail. So inside of this model quantity origin concept are 3 key terms: model-based, model-inferred, and model-informed. And those are the lens at which we look through to see different model objects and apply standardized estimating approaches. And finally, something Johnny said this morning really resonated with me. I'm going to change this slide after today, and I'm going to call it augmentation, because he's right. We're never going to fully automate everything, but we can certainly augment the process and gain significant efficiencies with automation. Here's where Estimator is going to shine, and here's why we're going to be able to actually do continuous estimating. This automation, update feature allows me to start estimating a model before it's ever finished. Let's hypothetically say I'm working with my design team and we get a model on Friday. We start estimating on Monday. They're continuing, not pencils down. They're continuing to model and design, resolve design issues. Friday, get a new update. Take that in Monday. All the things that I've already applied cost to automatically move over to the next version of the model. And anything that was introduced as a new object basically, falls out, and I get to pick that up and put it back in the model. It's a very seamless process. It's a very seamless process, and it's actually kind of fun. It's actually kind of fun to do. So it's really cool. The next feature that I'm looking forward to, which I put this intentionally in here to give a little bit of pressure to Beck Tech. Eric, I'm looking at you. Is automatic pricing for 3D. This is going to change the game. Automatic pricing, and I'm giving you my flavor of it because I have no idea what's in Eric's head, but my flavor of it is, hey, we have a Revit library of content. And for our 6-inch slab on grade, I want to map that to this assembly in my cost database for a 6-inch slab on grade. And when Estimator sees that slab object called 6-inch slab on grade, automatically apply this assembly to. Holy cow, that is amazing, right? So you're promising that next week, right, Eric? Plus or minus a week or two. Okay, look out for that feature. Finally, I do have to throw this in there because I've spent so many of my years training people in the pre-construction world. And I think we can get a little bit excited about this kind of stuff and forget from time to time that just because we're introducing a model or a new software or automation or AI, we still have a professional standard of care that we have to live up to. And so that's that QA, QC process. I'm right with Johnny on let's automate, let's augment as much as we can so that our teams can actually use their expertise to come back in and kind of QA, QC the process, not do the process. Let's finish on the why. Why are we going to invest our time in integrated estimating? Why are we going to start looking into this as a serious workflow? I think most people in this room are genuinely excited about where this industry is and where it's going. We hear terms like digital transformation. We hear terms like augmentation, automation, AI. In order to achieve that, there's some things we're going to have to come to terms with and reconcile. So if digital transformation, if we want to really transform this industry, if that's on our mind, then we've got to realize that we need to create opportunities for augmentation. I'm going to start adopting that. We need to create opportunities for true augmentation and trying intentionally to reduce waste in this process. We cannot introduce opportunities for automation or augmentation if we can't have some level of some expectation of consistency around what's coming down the assembly line. We cannot expect any kind of consistency in what's coming down the assembly line if we can't adopt any kind of standards. So what I'm excited about is if we can adopt a standard, if we can introduce some level of consistency in this process, and we know that when this model comes down the assembly line, we know what it's going to look like and feel like and behave like, we can start to apply some augmentation to that process, and we can truly start to transform how this industry is functioning, removing waste, becoming more efficient, increasing our accuracy. And I'm 100% confident that this workflow, as it's defined today, it's going to get better. We're still kind of early on. This workflow enables us to achieve this without placing a huge burden on either the design side of the industry or the pre-construction side of the industry. This is actually achievable. I'm really, really excited about this. So if you want to connect with me, I'm on LinkedIn. I kind of stopped doing business cards. Happy to connect with you. You can go to the BIM Forum website. If you've been there in the last 6 to 24 months, you probably didn't see much. BIMForm was going through some organizational changes. They used to be affiliated with AGC. They were trying to find a new home. I think they've kind of landed on something, and they've launched a new website and that kind of thing. And so if you go to the BIMForm website, you will see the estimating and scheduling with BIM guide that the task force produced. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. It's been fun.